The Shovel Knight games are near and dear to my heart, and for good reason. Yacht Club games were clearly inspired by many classic titles, chief among them being Mega Man. From the non-linear level order, to the 8 main bosses culminating in a set of final stages, complete with a rematch boss rush, to the artifacts you can collect in each level which give you an advantage in some boss battles, like the Robot Master weaknesses. It's not hard to draw comparisons. The series started with one Kickstarter game, but 3 expansions were released following that, and the library continues to grow, bringing the total up to 7 currently. I've been running through the games again on stream, and the X-Rank video did really well, so hey, while they're still fresh in my mind, why not do the same for Shovel Knight? Funnily enough, I consider all the games, except the lowest on the list, to be around the same in quality. That means that everything else is pure preference, but I still have strong feelings for said preferences. I'm Wes, the Explosion, and here's how I'd rank the Shovel Knight games, from least to favorite. Bottom of the list is Shovel Knight Showdown. Not really sure what they were going for here, but I guess I'd call it a badly balanced platform brawler. Some characters are a lot better than others. Everyone dies in just a few hits. The most common form of combat involves collecting gems, which spawn in randomly, so most of the match comes down to are you in a good spot to grab it when it does appear. The number you need also seems to be random, and when you're one away from victory, the game drags things out by waiting a much longer time than usual to generate the last gem. There's an odd points game that feels like it should be a bonus round instead, that uses a weird points multiplier and timer system so that you're either slowly building up points and refilling the timer, or you seem to just randomly win all at once if the right target slides onto the screen. The single player is constantly stacked against you, there being many matches where you're outnumbered 3-1 so that the opposing team can just gang up on you, more easily have someone in position to grab gems, and one of them having infinite lives. And when you do get an AI partner, they tend to be brain dead, dying constantly and losing your lives and gems. This might be the only title in the series that I consider bad. Still though, as a bonus for backers and the treasure trove collection, it can be kinda fun to fiddle around with, and who knows, maybe it'd make a good party game. If I had actually paid 15 or 20 bucks to buy it separately though, I'd probably be a bit upset. In 6th place is Plague of Shadows, and while I consider it a good game, I do not like playing this one. The way it works just feels too unnatural for me. Plague Knight jumps, throws bombs, and can charge a blast to do a super jump, which can even be used in the air. It's the last thing that gives me issues. First, the trajectory on this just feels way too wild. While I start to get the hang of it near the end of the game and can use it to bypass a lot of the obstacles, it never feels completely natural. Since I like having more control over my jumps, I wind up screaming at the games as one of my leaps doesn't go exactly how I was hoping. Then there's the actual button layout. There's the jump, and there's the attack, which also charges your super jump. Overlapping these two functions is already weird. Add on to that you can't cancel your charge, and you kinda need to think ahead a bit more. If you get thrown into a position where you need some extra air, hopefully you're already charging. If you need to attack and have a jump charge, better hope that you can release it in a way that doesn't shoot you into a bad position. Plague Knight also seems to take more knockback than the other characters in the games, making it typically better to have a jump charge, just in case. End hits tend to send him flying back the exact length needed for Propeller Knight to get an insta-kill on you. This expansion also seems the most underwhelming to me. It reuses just about everything from Shovel Knight, from the stages, to the music, to the bosses. The only changes the levels have are a new set of collectibles you use to buy abilities for Plague Knight, and one side path per stage that tests his unique abilities a bit more. I don't think I would have noticed or minded so much if the other 2 expansions hadn't remixed things so thoroughly, but it's kinda hard not to notice just how much this one recycles. The biggest differences with this one comes with Plague Knight himself. Other than how he plays, which I already mentioned, his loadout can be customized. You can change stuff like his standard bomb, added effects, and specials to suit the situation or your playstyle. While I wish I could say that I mixed and matched attributes until the game finally became fun for me, I tend to only really learn all the minutia of games I really like, and this one's wild playstyle unfortunately doesn't qualify. A shame too, because this one might have my favorite story of the bunch. I find the silly little romance charming. Pocket Dungeon is number 5 and a puzzle game, with roguelite elements. They really played around with other genres with this one. The game is great, having cute sprite work and a chiller soundtrack. It introduces some new characters, expanding the already great roster, and speaking of, most of the knights are playable, giving you a lot to work with. You can earn money through your runs and spend it on stuff like items that can drop in subsequent tries, or shortcuts if you're looking to skip some of the earlier levels. It truly is wonderful, which is why I'm sad to say, this one doesn't click with me as much as most of the series does. Part of it might be just how much I like platformers, and even though I do like dabbling with games like Tetris and Puyo Puyo, they just can't hold a candle to this other genre. Part of it might have to be how you have to balance offense and recovery, whereas I've been known to just have a bad habit of being aggressive and attacking. I think the main thing though is just how much there is to learn. You have basic rules and tactics, which are easy enough to pick up. Then you have enemy types to learn. There are also bosses you have to figure out how to counter. Then you start unlocking other characters and have to figure out how they work. Then there are all the items and weapons that you can either find or buy from chests or in dungeon, figuring out which are best for which situation or just mesh best with your playstyle. If I weren't a casual puzzle game player but instead an aficionado, I could see myself really sinking my teeth into this one and spending dozens, if not hundreds, of hours learning all the ins and outs, testing different characters and builds, and doing challenge runs of the game. As it stands, I managed to clear the game once, which I'm still a little surprised I managed, and while I like it, I shamefully have to admit that it's not really my thing. Number 4 is where it all started, Shovel Knight: Shovel of Hope. It was the little Kickstarter that could, doing well enough to not only deliver 3 expansions, but spawn a whole series, and delivering on its promises, generally leaving its backers happy with their investment. The developers are obvious students of the medium, and the game wears its influences on its sleeve. Chief among them being Mega Man, but also having elements from DuckTales, Mario 3, Zelda 2, Castlevania, Wario, heck, even the more recent Dark Souls, and whatever else I'm likely forgetting. That's not to say that Shovel Knight is just a lazy ripoff of the classics. While you can pick out some of the individual ingredients, the final product is an experience that's familiar yet unlike anything else. And it's not just a nostalgia trip either. The controls are good, the level's well designed with tons of secrets, encouraging you to explore. Each stage has its own gimmick, so they all feel fresh. The story's simple enough that it could easily be slipped into the front of an instruction booklet and you're able to pick it up in a few paragraphs, yet the dialogue's well done, and enough of the characters' personalities shine through that it's fun to engage with. The game's challenging, without being brutal, and with all the treasure you can find, it does a good job motivating you to not just beat the game, but get good at it. And most important of all, it's just a blast to play. This title kicked off the series, and I don't think any of the other entries would have been quite as successful at doing so. They really started off strong. Number 3 is the latest addition, Shovel Knight Dig. It once again stars the titular Shovel Knight, so you're back to slashing and pogoing using his trusty weapon, but this time it's a roguelite, which spices things up. You're constantly digging down, deeper and deeper, collecting treasure and looking for secret paths so you can open them up. There are 3 layers per area, followed by a boss, and as you reach the end of a layer, your path typically branches into 2, you getting an idea of what to expect with each by a sign posted at the entrances. And of course, as roguelite suggests, all this is randomized. Each time you'll get something different and probably learn something new. The randomization works well. While there have been a few instances where I've been stuck with some nasty combination, it never feels super unfair, and the only times I've felt by RNG were when a chest would float across the screen at a spot that was really hard for me to get, and hey, luck is always a factor in these types of games, so them's the breaks. As for the light elements, when you fall, you lose some treasure that can be reclaimed later, as normal, but the rest comes with you. Like Puzzle Dungeon, you can use those to open up shortcuts, unlock new artifacts that might help you in later trips, or buy a few permanent upgrades. There's a lot here, and I'm constantly finding new stuff out when I play it. Things slowly come into focus, and it's very rewarding the more I fiddle with it. I also like how they've gone from a more NES-looking graphical style to this new one that's more reminiscent of the SNES. The only real complaint I have is that the game is a bit short. I got my first clear a lot earlier than I thought I would. This was probably due to a combination of luck and being in practice with the series though, so my case may have been unique. I wish there were just a few more areas with maybe a few more characters, both new and returning, but I probably wouldn't be thinking that if I wasn't having such a good time. While the whole series is infinitely replayable to me, this entry in particular is one I can see doing so maybe a bit more than the rest. Knowing that I can go at it countless times and have a different experience for each really adds a lot. I really don't want to have to choose between the last two games, but hey, for the purposes of this video, I gotta. So in second place is King of Cards. I was actually debating where to put this one in the top 4 until the night before I recorded it, but playing around with it a bit more, off stream and no pressure, kinda solidified it here. So like I mentioned, after the original Shovel of Hope, there were 3 expansions to the main game. King of Cards was the final one, and this seems to have factored pretty heavily into how the game was designed. I just get the impression with this one that they thought, hey, players have already beaten 3 other campaigns, let's make this one really test what they've learned. It feels like a ROM hack of the original Shovel Knight, having short levels, but each one being more challenging and revolving around a different mechanic. While many are remixes of other games' stages, there are also several unique to this one. King Knight himself plays strangely, body-checking walls and enemies to send himself into a spin, him then being able to bounce off foes and breakable blocks, which allows him to further combo into another dash. It just sounds weird, and I don't even think I'm explaining it that well. It just seems so oddball to me, and yet it works. And I think that's why I love this one so much. The game will throw the craziest scenarios at you. You having to use the character with perhaps the weirdest moveset, and yet, no matter how unreasonable it seems, the gameplay is so fine-tuned that you can just do it. Add in King Knight's special moves, which are much more over the top compared to the other characters, giving him stuff like bomb-carrying rats, the ability to spin like a top to plow through enemies and climb walls, and 2 moves that remind me of Ike's Quick Draw and Aether from Smash Bros. And what you have is a character that's a ton of fun to play. And as always, there's a ton of secrets to find, plus the final boss is essentially X1 Sigma. You'll know what I mean when you see it. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there's also a card game, though I never mess around with it all that much. I could see myself getting into it more if there wasn't a penalty for losing. A loss lets your opponent take one of your cards, which you have to buy back, and the idea of grinding jewels for a while just so I can comfortably get in some practice just doesn't sound like a fun prospect. Still, you only need to engage with the minigame a bit in the first map, so it doesn't drag the game down, and I could see some people getting really into it. I also like the story for the game. I'm a big fan of King Knight, so getting a closer look at him is really appealing. The game's a prequel, so if you're familiar with the other games, you kinda know where everything's going to end up, yet despite that, on my original playthrough, I kinda found myself hoping that it would go better for the guy. I feel like I could talk for a while about what goes down, but maybe some other time. For now, I'll just reiterate that I really like King Knight and his campaign. And number 1, my personal favorite, is Spectre of Torment. While I already said that the series is inspired by Mega Man, this one in particular seems to be more heavily influenced than most, specifically by the X games. Rather than unlocking a path on the map, here you just have a level select, letting you choose the stages in whatever order you want. While you still have to buy them, here, rather than finding a special item in the stage, a new one gets unlocked for purchase after beating a boss, which feels closer to Mega Man's special weapons. Spectre Knight can run up walls a short distance, giving him more verticality. As long as he has something he can slash through, Spectre Knight can air dash. There are rail sections, which feel very similar to both Donkey Kong Country's minecarts and X's Ride Chaser. The game also seems to just play a lot faster, so that the jump from Shovel to Spectre feels much more like the jump from Classic to X. While my time for this one isn't all that different from the other entries, it always feels like I'm tearing through it. The game just feels all around like they put a ton of effort into it. Not only are the stages remixed and reworked for Spectre Knight, but so is the soundtrack. The game is another prequel, and rather than just set up one character's backstory, this sets the stage for everything that happens after, with there being a lot of dots you can connect if you play all 4 main campaigns. Everything, even some pretty silly stuff, feels very interconnected. It also sets up Spectre Knight as a complex character. Even now, I'm not entirely sure whether I like him, whether I sympathize with him, or if I can even see him as redeemable, but going through his tale certainly keeps my attention. More than anything though is just how well the game plays. Like with King Knight, they will throw some ridiculous things your way, and while it may seem daunting, level design, Spectre Knight's abilities, and control are all incorporated so well into each other that overcoming challenges feels natural and incredible. While I can sit through tutorials, I much prefer a hands-on approach, just picking up a controller and pressing buttons until I figure out what I'm able to do. This comes so easily in this game, and I'm able to master them so quickly that I kinda want to give more credit to the game's creators than myself. They seem to have such a good grip on what feels good and intuitive to play, and they executed it perfectly. I don't think I can overstate how much fun I have playing through this one. And that's it for my list, from least to favorite. While I may have stronger feelings for some than others, I really think that the series is terrific, and I would recommend it to anyone who's a fan of retro games and platformers. It's bound to have something you like mixed in. Start with Shovel of Hope and then go from there. What of your own list though? Just about every entry has its own playstyle, so I'd love to hear which games other people gravitate towards. I wouldn't mind doing a few more scripted videos on Shovel Knight, but that'll depend on how this one goes over. While I maintain that this is still Mega Man, I'm not sure if it'll be Mega Man enough. Consider this one an experiment. With that said, thanks for watching, maybe consider subscribing if you like content on Mega Man and similar games, and perhaps I'll see you in the next one.